The day's other headlines begin with the sex trafficking trial of Sean P. Diddy Combs. Late today, the jury reached a partial verdict on 4 of the 5 counts against the hip-hop mogul. However, they were not able to reach a decision on the top charge, that's racketeering conspiracy. The jurors will return for deliberations tomorrow. Combs is also charged with sex trafficking and transportation to engage in prostitution. He denies all charges. Turning overseas, more than 165 international charities and aid organizations are calling for a shutdown of the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. That's the new Israeli and U.S.-backed food distribution network in Gaza that's been plagued by violence. Palestinian health officials say more than 500 people have been killed near the sites in the past month, either by Israeli troops or strikes. The IDF says it only targets Hamas militants. Groups like Oxfam, Save the Children, and Amnesty International said in a statement that, quote, Palestinians in Gaza face an impossible choice: starve or risk being shot while trying desperately to reach food. The foundation has taken the place of many UN-backed groups because Israel says Hamas was siphoning aid. In Europe, the first major heat wave of the summer showed no signs of relenting and is expected to peak over the coming days. In Barcelona, Spain, temperatures topped a record for the month of June that stood for over 110 years. More than 400 climate shelters were opened across the city to give people access to air conditioning. Across Europe, tourists sought ways to keep cool, including here in Italy, where people doused themselves with water from fountains. 17 of Italy's 27 major cities were under red alert heat warnings, and it felt even hotter for travelers who are used to such conditions.
I'm from Texas, so I'm kind of used to the hot because it gets about the same temperatures, but I expected it to be somewhere in the 80s, not in the almost 100 degrees.
In Paris, the top of the Eiffel Tower was closed due to unsafe heat conditions as more than 1,000 schools across France were either partially or fully canceled. Temperatures in Paris remained at 101 degrees Fahrenheit even at sunset. The University of Pennsylvania has agreed to ban transgender athletes from its women's sports in order to resolve its federal civil rights case with the Trump administration. The Department of Education said as part of the voluntary agreement that Penn will restore all individual Division I swimming records and titles to female athletes who lost to Leah Thomas, the transgender swimmer who last competed for the Ivy League school back in 2022 and became the center of controversy. In a statement to the NewsHour, Penn acknowledged the agreement and added, quote, Penn has always followed and continues to follow Title IX and the applicable policy of the NCAA regarding transgender athletes. A federal judge in Rhode Island today blocked the Department of Health and Human Services from moving forward with mass layoffs and ordered the agency to stop its plans to restructure the workforce. District Judge Melissa DuBose granted a preliminary injunction sought by 19 Democratic-led states and the District of Columbia, writing the action was both arbitrary and capricious, as well as contrary to law. The judge also ordered the parties to address whether the Supreme Court's recent ruling on limiting injunctions should apply to her order. The ruling comes just one day before thousands of layoffs were set to become final. Still, today marks the end of an era for 6 decades of U.S. foreign assistance. The U.S. Agency for International Development, or USAID, has been officially closed and absorbed into the U.S. State Department. It's the final step for the aid agency that was a first target for cuts by the Trump administration and then by Elon Musk's Doge. In a statement, Secretary of State Marco Rubio said, beyond creating a globe-spanning NGO industrial complex at taxpayer expense, USAID has little to show since the end of the Cold War. This era of government-sanctioned inefficiency has officially come to an end. Critics of the move say dissolving the agency could have devastating consequences for world hunger and famine. Those include former Presidents Barack Obama, George W. Bush, and rock star Bono, who all shared private recorded messages with USAID employees yesterday. It was a mixed day of trading on Wall Street after several days of record-setting highs. The Dow Jones Industrial Average was the only gain among the major indices, adding almost 1%. The Nasdaq fell by close to a percentage point, while the S&P 500 slipped just marginally. And one of the most well-known televangelists in America, Jimmy Swaggart, has died. Stephanie Sy has our look at his life, controversies, and legacy he leaves behind.
Jesus, Jesus.
Whether he was bellowing gospel at the piano
or delivering a thunderous sermon.
When I'm sleeping, it's Jesus. I eat Jesus, dream Jesus, think Jesus, talk Jesus 24 hours a day.
Jimmy Swaggart knew how to captivate an audience. Congregates in church moved to tears, and millions more tuning in from home.
You shall never thirst.
He was one of the most popular televangelists of the early 1980s, crusading around the globe with his multi-million-dollar ministry. It was a far cry from his early days, growing up poor in Louisiana. His ministry started in 1955. He began broadcasting on the radio in the 60s, then started a magazine, and soon rose to fame on TV. Swaggart's telecast aired in more than 140 countries.
You were made for more than profanity and filth and obscenity and to burn in hell. You were made in the image of God to walk in the image of your Father forever and forever. Hallelujah.
But the worldly temptations Swaggart warned against would eventually lead to his own downfall. In the late 80s and early 90s, he was caught in multiple scandals involving prostitutes.
I have sinned against you, my Lord.
Swaggart kept preaching for decades, but to dwindling audiences. 2 weeks ago, his family announced he went into cardiac arrest. He never regained consciousness. Jimmy Swaggart was 90 years old. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Stephanie Sy.
Still to come on the NewsHour, President Trump visits a new migrant detention center as Congress prepares to approve a windfall for his crackdown. A NewsHour poll reveals Americans' views on key Trump administration policies, and a twice-a-year shot prompts hopes of curbing new cases of HIV.
This is the PBS NewsHour from the David M. Rubenstein Studio at WETA in Washington, and in the West from the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism at Arizona State University.